Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. As you can see, the cowboy cosplay week is all over with. No more cowboy hat and Western shirts. I'm back to my wrinkled shirts with the bad collars and the same old jacket. I'll never be a fashion maven, and nobody's ever accused me of being one. Good to see you jumping in there already in the comments. Jordan, BC Prairie Girl. Use those comments. You know, it's a live show. I like to see the interaction, chat with each other, send questions my way, my guest's way. Just keep it civil. And yeah, we can have a fun time and cover a few issues. There's a lot to cover. Oh, God, what a lunacy, crazy world we got going on. Good to see you there, Todd. And yeah, so a guest I got coming on in a little while, Krystle Wittevrongel from the Montreal Economic Institute. She's going to talk about a column she did on the emissions caps and basically how investment is getting driven out of Canada, Alberta, of course, in particular, as usual. And we'll be checking in with Dave and doing a few other things soon as well. But I'll start on what I'm going to be ranting and raving about as per the title. So let's talk about this. So back in May, it was looking likely that Donald Trump was well poised to win the presidential election that's coming up this fall. Now, after the debate came out in June and exposed President Biden as a dotard with an advanced cognitive decline problem, Trump's electoral victory was pretty much all but assured. I see now they're actually rushing to lock Biden in as their candidate. It's such an exercise in political suicide to watch with the Democrats. It's really something else. Not that I don't know who's going to beat the Trump machine these days anyways. Now with that failed assassination attempt on Trump last weekend, Trump's victory is virtually inevitable, assuming some lunatic doesn't manage to kill him before this fall. The strength and leadership win elections more than policies do. So while Biden can barely navigate a set of stairs or string together a coherent thought, Trump appears more vigorous and focused than ever. It's hard to believe they're only 3 years apart in age. When Trump defiantly rose with blood streaming down his face and pumped his fist while shouting fight, he drew more support than 1,000 rallies and $1 billion in advertising ever could have. I probably would have been cowered in the fetal position and waiting for the Secret Service to drag me off the stage in such a situation. Again, I'm not a huge Trump fan, but man, that was a show of strength and defiance. You know, it's undeniable. And with it looking so likely that Trump's going to be the next president of the United States, the Trudeau Liberals have to stop their campaign of villainizing the man. I mean, Trudeau's been trying to present himself as the person who can prevent Canada or protect Canada from the evil machinations of a Trump administration. And the Liberals just can't stop themselves from pejoratively accusing Canadian Conservatives of being Trump-like. Using Trump as a foil to campaign against, others within Canada is irresponsible, and it's going to cost Canadians dearly if and when Trump becomes the next president. I mean, Trump already had little use for Justin Trudeau, as most of us don't. And if the Trudeau government continues to antagonize Trump, we can rest assured Trump's going to retaliate. Canadians, when he takes power, they're going to get it. He has a long memory, thin skin, and he holds grudges. And Canada has a resource-based, export-focused economy. Now, thanks to nearly a decade of Trudeau's inept fiscal management, his support of mass immigration, and his obsession with shutting in Canada's resource sectors, the cost of living in Canada has skyrocketed, while the personal wealth of Canadians has been in steady decline. Now, the United States is by far Canada's largest trading partner, as they purchase over 64% of our exports. Canada's economy would be rocked even by small tariffs imposed by the USA, and Trudeau's campaign of insulting Trump is inviting those kinds of policies. I mean, protectionism always sells well during campaigns in the United States. The Democrats and the Republicans both use it as a policy plank in every election. Trudeau's actions are only going to add personal satisfaction to Trump when he vindictively punishes Canadian businesses upon becoming president. And don't think for a second he won't do it. In business, a business owner doesn't have to like every customer. A wise business owner, though, they won't express their dislike to their top customer. They shut up. They know when it's best to shut up. When Trudeau and his ministers start taking shots at Trump, it's not just the Republicans they annoy, by the way. People tend to rally the troops when an outsider starts poking their nose into their business. And there's many American governors, business leaders, and other people of influence who aren't very thrilled with Trudeau's words either. We need to be solidifying and expanding our relationship with our biggest neighbor and ally, no matter who's leading that country. The Trudeau Liberals certainly don't need to be kowtowing to Trump or any other politician for that matter. In trade issues, they do need to show some strength. But they also need to exercise a degree of careful diplomacy. During the next 4 volatile months of campaigning in the USA, the wisest thing the Canadian government can do is just to shut the hell up about it. Trudeau won't have an influence on the outcome of the American election, but he sure as hell will be setting the tone for Canada's relationship with the next administration. And so far, that tone isn't good. Nuance, diplomacy, wisdom, and economic sense are all concepts that have eluded Justin Trudeau so far. That's why the Liberals are facing an almost certain electoral obliteration when they finally allow Canadians to vote. It's a lot to ask and expect of the Trudeau Liberals, but if they could just lay off the attacks against Trump, it would do us all a favor on both sides of the border. God knows Trudeau has enough to deal with at home. Maybe he should try doing that for a change. All right, well, that's what's got me going today, and we'll see how that goes. I'm sure he won't shut up, but we can at least ask, right? All right, well, let's see what else is going on out there. We have in studio our news editor, Dave Naylor. How's it going, Dave?
Oh, busier than a one-arm paper hanger.
Oh, yeah.
It's just crazy, isn't it, this last week?
You don't have to search for things to put in there now. You just have to
I suppose.
curate and figure out what's worthy.
Triage what's the best.
Yeah.
But obviously our viewers and listeners are interested in your health after your recent medical procedure.
Yeah.
I understand you're having some uncomfortable Uber business.
There has been, yes, as some folks know, I drive Uber in my spare time. I like it. I enjoy it. It gets me out. I talk to people. And as others might not know, yes, I had recent surgery on my left butt cheek, and it's very, very uncomfortable still. It's recovering, but I have a big pillow on the front seat of my car, and when I get in and out to get people luggage and things, they see me easing in slowly into my seat and so on, looking at that pillow, and all I can imagine is they're thinking this driver's got to be loaded with hemorrhoids or something, but it stunts the conversation for the ride. Maybe it'll get me some sympathy tips, though.
There you go. That's all you can hope for.
Yeah.
So as mentioned, very busy morning today, Cory. We're leading off the side right now with an interesting story actually out of Lethbridge. There was a big motorcycle charity run there on Saturday. And there's a group called the Commandos Motorcycle Club. And they're a group of veterans and former soldiers who get together, ride motorcycles, and raise money for charity. Now, they are not the Hells Angels or the Banditos of the world. They're not an outlaw motorcycle gang. But Lethbridge does have a bylaw that allows police officers to remove patch-wearing bikers from drinking establishments. So these 35 poor members of the Commandos were in a local bar, just drinking soft drinks and food, and cops arrived and said, "Get out." So they're defending their action on that. Another fun story out of Vancouver Island, where a burgeoning couple decided they would go to the Coldplay concert in Vancouver. But I guess that's where things sort of started to fell apart, where the gentleman asked the girl to pay her share. And she thought, "Oh, no, it's a date, you're paying." Well, he took her to court and actually won. So we've got a complete list of exactly what he spent on the date, including $63 for Smitty's. I don't know what you can spend on Smitty's for $63. Tons of fallout, obviously, from the Trump assassination attempt. We've got Lee Harding with an interview with a former top Mountie who describes it as, quote, a colossal cock-up, quote, the Secret Service actions. And we got our Mike Thomas putting together all the Secret Service sort of excuses, including the lamest one ever was that they didn't put a sniper up there because the roof was too slanted. And it's not. It's not. So we got all that stuff to come. Our Linda Slobodian's got a great column. On Boxing Day, there was a machete attack at the Calgary Zoo with an Indigenous guy stoned on fentanyl, going around trying to slash people and kill people at the zoo. Well, he was sentenced this week to basically time served. And Linda's got an exclusive interview with the victim, who was one of the victims who was slashed. And she says, look, this was a hate crime. This is being ignored by the justice system. And you know, she didn't even get to see the guy in court, really.
Yeah, I remember that one when it happened, actually. Yeah. It was quite terrifying. I haven't got a chance to grab Linda's column yet. I imagine she might have pointed out it was probably a Gladue case.
Yes. And even the victim has sympathy for the family, saying, you know, his mother looked bedraggled and, you know, he's... but yeah, well, you know, hopefully they can rehabilitate him. Some idiot last night in Edmonton was waving around a replica handgun. And you know what happens when cops see that? They shoot them. And that's what happened. And he's now in critical condition as ACERT investigates. And DEI in the United States in full retreat. This is a week or so after a major tractor company canceled all their DEI stuff. We now know that Microsoft has also done the same thing, firing their entire DEI team. And John Deere capitulated after about only a week of internet pressure. they have now said they're going to concentrate on selling tractors and not sponsoring pride parades. So that's some good stuff in the States. I just want to mention one more Linda column that actually came in yesterday. You remember she broke the story on the 14-year-old who was dancing in trans bars in Edmonton, and the kid is autistic and mentally, and her mom's just pushing her to do this. Well, the people who are hosting the Burnaby Pride Day this Saturday have hired her as the main headliner. So they're going to bring in this poor 14-year-old girl who's going to be dancing in front of lecherous perverts. So that's a great column from Linda too. So coming up on the website this afternoon, we'll have the latest on that big storm in Toronto yesterday, including some incredible footage of flooding in Drake's mansion. It looks like they just opened the front door to a river. So. And I understand our business expert, Sean Polzer, will be joining you again today. I'm sure he can fill you in more on all the DEI stuff.
Great. Well, yes, there was quite a list to cover, and I know you got a whole whack more. So, well, thanks for the update, Dave. I'll let you get back to your desk there to keep sifting through these news stories and getting them out there.
Pleasure as always, Cory.
Right on. Thanks, Dave. It's always nicer to talk to Dave in person in this studio. Look him in the eye and see if he's being truthful about those stories or not. Yeah, some of them are just beyond the pale, and it finds, almost to be too hard to believe. And as he pointed out, yeah, Linda wrote on that with that 14-year-old who has been out at strip bars. This whole issue just gets so insane. The activists, the lunatics. Like, I couldn't care less about drag shows. Calgary's had them for decades. I remember back in the 90s, there was a bar in Calgary called Boys Town, I believe it was, and they had weekly drag shows. They get out there, do their thing, have a good time. Good for them, right on, have fun. I don't care. And most people didn't. But the activists have to keep pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope. And the problem, the issue that people have now, this is a 14-year-old autistic child doing sexualized shows, not just in drag. This has been covered. If you want to research it, the videos that were posted with Linda's stories and so on, she's performing strip teases at 14. Ironically, if a straight 14-year-old girl was put on a stage in a strip club, the police would be in there arresting the sick buggers who are sitting around watching her and whoever put her on the stage in the first place. But they're terrified when it comes to drag. Suddenly, somehow, this becomes above the law. No, it's not. And it's really, really deranged. I don't know what kind of person wants to sit and watch a 14-year-old doing a sexualized dance and striptease like that, but we're putting up with that. And unfortunately, these sorts of things end up inflaming the intolerant. And then you get backlash against the other drag shows where people were just having fun, where they were grown adults doing their thing in a private venue where they should have every right to do so. We got to draw a line in the sand with the activists. It's the activists who push the line so far that nobody can handle it anymore. So I noticed Jordan asking, why doesn't Linda come on? By the way, yeah, I've had Linda on in the past a couple of times. She's out in Manitoba. She just much prefers writing. As you can see, she's very prolific. She covers a lot of things, and she's been at it a long time rather than coming on the shows. I've had her on. She likes to chat now and then on the shows, but she's not big on coming onto these live sorts of things. It's not everybody's bag, It doesn't love listening to the sound of her own voice as much as I do, where I can look forward to doing this every week and babbling at you. But rest assured, Linda will keep breaking those things and writing on them. This is my last, reminder to remind you the reason Linda can do that, Dave can do that, and Jonathan Bradley's putting out those stories, Jen, all of those folks we got all over the place. We're one of the busiest newsrooms in Western Canada, actually, a physical newsroom, is because you guys have subscribed. So, hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, get out there, guys. westernstandard.news/subscription. It'll get you past the paywall. $9.99 a month, $100 a year, just like a newspaper subscription. And it keeps all these reporters running so that you can have a news source and doesn't take a penny of your tax dollars. It's very important. Point of principle and just a point of being responsible. All right. Let's speak to somebody else who's got a responsible viewpoint on things. It's been a while since we've had her on. She's been on before, though. Krystle Wittevrongel of the Montreal Economic Institute. She recently gave us a column on emissions caps and energy use. Hi, Krystle. How you doing?
Hi, I'm great. How are you today?
Oh, good. Got lots of ranting and raving in me, but I'll let things cool down so you can explain more in the column and what you I guess expressed. I mean, you talked. It was entitled "Friends Shouldn't Let Friends Buy Natural Gas from Bad Places," and you spoke though at length on, I guess, the emissions caps and how investment is really getting pressured on Canada's energy sector.
Yeah, so last year, the federal government had proposed a cap on emissions for the oil and gas sector to cap them between 35 to 38% below 2019 levels. So essentially, it's a cap on production is what the column is about. And it really just talks about how we as a global economy are going to see increased demand for oil and gas products through 2030 and beyond. And if Canada is not willing to allow our product to market, our product being the responsibly produced oil and gas, done with very high environmental regulations, somebody else will. And we've seen that happen in the past couple of years where Japan and Germany and Greece have all come to us as Canadians and said, we want your resources. And when the federal government turned down Germany, they then struck a deal with Qatar. So it's not that oil and gas production is globally just going to cease. It's still 82% of energy use. It's just going to be done elsewhere, much to the hurt of Canadians. And for what gain, really? Because the emissions are still going to be there and likely going to be increased because they're coming from places with less environmental protections than we have here.
Well, and as well, some of those producers are often a little less than friendly with human rights protections and labor, restrictions as well. I mean, Canada is one of the most ethical producers in the world, yet we're the ones punishing ourselves the most often for what we're doing.
Exactly. And the oil and gas sector employs over 700,000 people in this country, which, accounts for over 12% of our GDP. So this is a huge sector. In Alberta, of course, we're going to feel it most heavily when the cap on production ultimately comes in. The government is saying this isn't a cap on production, this is a cap on emissions. But we found last year that this is a cap on production, and Deloitte has now released a report saying it will be a cap on production. And in Alberta alone, we're looking at 54,000 job losses by 2030 linked to this emissions cap. So we're going to feel it. We're going to feel it hard. And for what benefit? Really, I think a more broad discussion needs to happen about global emissions and not what Canada can do to reduce our local emissions if we're just contributing to a increase globally.
Yeah, well, and it's just the attitude has caused an investment chill. I mean, the stats you put, it's staggering how much investment in the energy sector is plummeted from 2014 until 2023. I mean, this is all started prior to the emissions cap, but I mean, this is the investment community responding to signals from the federal government saying that they're not going to allow future production, essentially.
Exactly. And further, if this emissions cap does go in, by 2030, there's going to be a $75 billion less investment than there would have been by 2030. So we're seeing already there's a huge hit in the investment community up to now. It's only going to get worse. And investment certainty is a big part of it when it comes to the regulatory environment. And if there's this pancaking of policies, one on top of the other, which we do see when it comes to climate change and emissions regulations, is just policy after policy, there's very little certainty around that, and it's very complex. So it's become this very murky environment for investors, and quite frankly, I don't blame them.
Well, and some of the Canadian circumstance, the irony is two things. I mean, for one, oil and gas generate a heck of a lot of revenue for Canadians everywhere, not just in Alberta. It's a massive part of our GDP. Mm-hmm. And as well, we end up having oil and gas imports coming in on Eastern Canada while we're having difficulty getting our product to market in the West, again, due to a government that just doesn't allow us to build the infrastructure to move it around.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's been a huge problem, and it will just continue to become a problem, especially as global demand continues to increase. And when our allies and these other countries are trying to get off of the oil and gas supplies from places like Russia or other nations that have really just atrocious records when it comes to, like you mentioned, human rights and other things, it's really a constant question of what we're doing. We're missing the forest for the trees is really what's happening here.
So, I mean, I know it's difficult. You guys, put out your reports. You try to stay non-political, which is fair enough. But there's a good chance we're going to have a change in governments coming in a year and change, perhaps, that would change the investment environment. Do you feel that some of this damage could be undone at least?
I think there's going to be a lot of work needing to be done under any government when it comes to this regulatory environment and providing some level of certainty to investors. There's been just change after change constantly, which a lot of these huge, what am I looking for? Like CCUS, for example, that are plugged onto existing facilities, they're lacking in the ability to continue on and grow and get more online because of the investment environment. And so any government is really going to have to do quite a heavy job of telling investors and proving to investors what can be done in this country and what won't be undone, in 4 to 8 to 10 years, because these things take long amounts of time. So if we want to be able to move forward and actually do our job in reducing emissions globally, we need some level of certainty here. And whether that's under the current government or a future government, it's definitely should be a priority.
Well, and something else you mentioned in the column is Ottawa is not really trumpeting the amount of progress the industry has made in reducing emissions. I mean, presuming emissions are a problem, fine. The Canadian industries have actually been doing very, very well in reducing the emissions, but they're not getting no credit for it. They're still just constantly get accused of being environmental monsters.
Yeah, exactly. So the efficiencies in this sector have been really, really impressive. We've reduced the emission intensity per barrel of oil, so how many emissions are being released per barrel of oil, quite substantially, and overall as well. So there is a lot of work that has been done, and this has been done because these companies and these investors believe in this, and they believe that we do have a part to play in reducing emissions. And so continuing to innovate to be able to do that is very important, which is where some of that investment comes in as well. I just mentioned with CCUS, for example, like carbon capture has a lot of potential, but it is not yet at the level that can make these huge, great big, changes that the government is really saying they should be able to do. And to be able to get there, we need the investment. And the companies that invest in this sort of thing are those who are producing and exporting and that. So if they're not able to be investing, we're not going to get that forward momentum in that area either. So future emissions reductions and intensity reductions are going to be quite,
Yeah. And it's not just, as you kind of point out, it's not just a domestic market or the international market to purchase our products. It's the investment market that's international that people have to realize. People are looking to get a return on their dollars, whether they're in the United States or Europe or their pension funds. And if they can't get a good return here, they're going to take it somewhere else. And they have been.
Exactly. And even the emissions, back to the emissions coming from somewhere else. Like if we look at British Columbia, so when that province instituted its carbon tax back in 2008, the market share for imported cement, which is very emissions intensive, went from 6% to 40%. So they didn't reduce their emissions that stem from cement production. They just exported the emissions in terms of where the cement was coming from. So we lost that market share. So that's what's going to happen here with oil and gas is we're going to see a lot of it exported and emissions intensity grow because these other countries don't have the same sort of rules, regulations, and checkpoints that we already do and pride ourselves on. So yeah, it's quite a conundrum and it's quite a headbanger for most of us here.
Yeah, well, some of the ethical case that could be made, I mean, as you sort of pointed out, India, China, I mean, these are high emitting countries. They still burn a heck of a lot of coal. If they could get cost effective liquid natural gas, they would be more than happy to use that. And it's of a lower emission intensity than the coal. But we got to make that case to Canadians because we get demonized for the natural gas as if it's a bad thing. I mean, maybe use the word mitigate. I mean, we can mitigate when it comes to addictions and drug use. Well, why can't we accept the mitigation of harm when it comes to fuels?
Exactly. Countries around the world, like you mentioned, China and India, are looking to reduce their emissions footprints as well. It's not just Canada. And one of the easiest ways of doing it is to get off of coal and transition away from coal and onto natural gas. So by being the fourth largest producer of natural gas, Canada is well positioned to help these countries get there and overall reduce the amount of global emissions. So our regulations are more stringent. Our product being natural gas is cleaner and burns less emissions. So it's a win-win across the board and without hurting the Canadian economy to the extent that we're talking about here when we're talking about such a huge hit with this emissions cap.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we can get the word out, I think there's a lot of misconceptions with a lot of Canadians, I think, often outside of the West. It's not necessarily their fault. Perhaps they're not getting the whole picture. And that's a lot of what you guys have been doing with the Montreal Economic Institute. It really is appreciated. It's a tough slog, and you're getting it out there. So before I let you go, where can people find your work and get this stuff out to other folks who need to hear and read it?
Yeah, so we are online at www.iedm.org. And all of our studies, commentaries, you name it, you can find it there. And a wide range of issues, energy and environment being one of them, definitely.
Yeah, and despite the name, it's not just Montreal centered. You're covering national issues.
Exactly. And I'm here in Calgary, so we are very much a pan-Canadian think tank at this point.
Excellent. As we saw with the Western Standard, you get some columns and op-eds out there as well. So I really appreciate you guys, fighting the good fight for us out there and for your coming on today to talk to us about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always so much fun chatting with you.
Great. Thanks, Krystle. Hope we get to talk again soon.
You bet. Thanks.
So yeah, guys, look that up. There's a lot of great resources and a lot of articles and things from Krystle and others at the Montreal Economic Institute. Look it up. It's well worth it. So, some of the questions that came in, and it's interesting, from Jordan actually talking about with the natural gas, with the export of it, what would it do for our domestic prices? Not much on domestic prices, because it's basically, when it comes to domestic prices, it's on the world gas prices. So if anything, it might reduce it a little bit, because when you're adding more to the markets, you might reduce the world price a little bit, and that'll take your gas bill down a bit. The problem we have in Canada with a lot of our natural gas, our energy, our bills, when you look at your bill, the gas itself is just a small part of it. It's all the add-ons and extra costs and taxes and garbage that makes it so bloody expensive. And as you were saying, wouldn't it increase our prices if rich Asian buyers are upping the bids? No, it wouldn't, because they're already bidding on all the energy they can. So as long as we're adding more product to that market, it should stabilize or even possibly reduce world prices. But like I said, a lot of our issue domestically isn't the world price that really costs us. It's all the rest of the garbage and add-ons and stuff from the government that makes everything so costly and unaffordable, which is so ridiculous when we live in an energy capital like Canada. I was talking to somebody the other day. I spent 4 winters working in the Arctic on oil and gas programs up there in exploration. Look it up, in the Northwest Territories and a bit into the Yukon, even up by Eagle Plains and areas, there are thousands of capped wells. They've been doing it since the 60s up there. They've pretty much stopped it all now because the McKenzie pipeline got stunted and held up by the Berger Commission in the 70s, and they've sat on it, and eventually the price of the pipeline got so high. The government approved it a few years ago, say, okay, we're finally going to let you guys do it. And it had gone up, I think, from like $2 billion to $14 billion, and the partners in it said, it's not worth it, and they left it there. We have another Alberta worth of oil and gas sitting up there. It's just sitting up there, guys. They aren't taking it out of the ground, but we know it's there. We've done the seismic. We've done the exploratory drilling. The work is done. It's there. But we're living under this absurd myth that we can replace oil and gas as fuel sources. Lunatics like Trudeau and Guilbeault really think that we can just somehow snap our fingers, shut off oil and gas, and we will just magically switch to other sources of energy. All it will do is cause a catastrophe economically and humanly. I mean, we can't live without energy in Canada. We will freeze to death. But these guys aren't bound by logic. They aren't bound by common sense like that. So they are perfectly fine leaving all of that abundant energy up there untapped, because they just think we're all going to go solar soon anyways, or have little windmills or other little magical areas. Unicorn piss and the laughter of children is somehow going to turn the lights on in your house. It doesn't work that way. And Jordan pointing out again, more nuclear. He said, yes, nuclear is another option. Saskatchewan has a lot of uranium resources. Nuclear is very capital intensive to get up and running, but once it's going, it does generate energy and it doesn't have emissions. Yet the environmentalists hate that too. This is some of the logic we've got to realize, or we got to push back with these environmentalists, is that we'll never pacify them. We'll never make them happy. They are like trying to ration with a street preacher who's screaming and raging on a street corner about their whatever faith it may be. You can't reason with them. They're nuts. They're nuts. Anybody who thinks we can just shut down oil and gas, they're crazy. They are immune to logic and reality. Listen to David Suzuki sometime. Listen to Justin Trudeau. Well, I don't suggest that. I mean, you'll want to stab yourself in the ear with a pencil if you listen to Justin too long, but you know what I mean. But that's what's good coming out of the Economic Institute. We'll try to get to the rational people, talk about it. Emissions have been reduced with conventional energy. We have excellent controls in place, and we're getting better and better with it. Brenda Kutcherin? But yeah, either way, Brenda, yeah, I see a lot on X there. Says, it takes so much energy to produce batteries, solar, and wind. Yeah, and it's absolutely right. Like they act as if these renewables have no footprint. They act as if it doesn't take any resources from somewhere else to build these other energy sources, which, by the way, are intermittent. So we need to get that messaging out there. Hopefully the rational people will catch on to it and we can go with that. I mean, if it gets there, if the energy sources get there, people will switch. I will. I've talked about that before. I think I mentioned it on the show. I got a beat up old lawnmower I use at home at the acreage. I need my exercise. So I hand mow and push that thing around and everything. And it's getting older and older. It's a gas powered one. One of these days it's going to blow up on me. I'm using it as long as I can get away with. But you know what? When I do switch, I'm going to go with one of the rechargeable electric mowers. Not because I'm trying to save the world. Not because of reducing emissions or something like that. It's because it's come to a price point now on those mowers and they hold the charge well enough that it's worth me having it out there and using it on my lawn. That's all. It's worth it. So I'm going to go with it. I don't need to be forced to it though. I don't need a gun to my head to do it. I'll do it when it makes financial sense to me and it becomes practical. And people will do that if and when electric vehicles get that way, or solar powering and things like that. They will get there, just leave them be. If the product becomes good enough, people will switch. Commenter Sleeping Lion is saying, are you saying street preachers are irrational? No, I'm saying they're batshit crazy. They're beyond irrational. And if you've gone to a corner and listened to some of them, they're nuts. But hey, they have the right to be nuts. They have the right to stand on a corner and spew out whatever loony interpretation of their religious text they have. I do believe in their right to do that, but I have the right to call them out as the kooks that they are. So yes, I'm not typically big on street preachers. And you don't want to get me going on Pawlowski. I've gone on about him before. Again, the guy was ill-treated, but he's still a nut. And I will say it when that is the case. Yeah, Brenda's saying switch to a battery mower. The battery didn't last 2 years. Okay, well, that's unfortunate. The newer ones, from what I've gathered, tend to go better. I mean, I think of it like 10, 15 years ago. How would you even have considered a battery-powered skill saw or a battery-powered even the drills and that? I mean, you'd see them as a convenience around the house, but you wouldn't see contractors using them. They were still plugging in, but they've gotten good enough that, again, the cost and the practicality and the rest, they've switched. Either way, just let the market decide it. Quit trying to do it through regulation. We'll get there. Now, speaking of markets deciding things, this is a great story to get into as well as we get into business things. I've been watching. So Elon Musk, boy, he's if you talk about that term that was kind of trendy for a little while, disruptor was one of them, right? And Musk is a disruptor, and he certainly shakes things up. I mean, it's easy to be a disruptor when you got, hundreds of billions in the bank to play with. And he just likes to get out there and poke the stick in the ant's nest. And with what he's done with X has been fantastic. The left all predicted it would fail years ago when he bought it, and it seems to be flourishing so far, but now he's doing what so many other people and businesses are doing in the United States, and they do all around the world. When we're talking about, it kind of ties into what I was talking to Krystle about before too, is that capital will move to better locations, if you let the market do it. Musk, he had already moved Tesla out of California. Because California's gone nutty. It's gone way off to the far left under Gavin Newsom. They've been punishing their businesses. Cities like, man, it's a tuberculosis ward in here or something going on today. Either way, it must be that global warming causing something. He's now moving SpaceX and X. The headquarters of those are going to Texas. And we're seeing that all around the United States, actually. Is migration out of California, out of New York, they're leaving. I mean, new immigrants are coming in and moving into these areas. But interstate migration from professionals, from companies, they're leaving, and in the hundreds of thousands. And it kind of bodes really terribly for California. California is in dire, dire condition. It's making me think of, a North American Venezuela. When you look at it, California's got everything. I mean, they got beautiful weather. They got some great agricultural businesses. They had the tech sector. They had oil and gas. They have Hollywood. They have all of this stuff down there, and they've blown it. Their policies have been so horrible that people are fleeing. They are leaving. And what the problem is, when the productive leave, what's left behind tends not to be the cream of the crop. I've talked about that when I worked in Steubenville, Ohio, for example. That was an area that's in the Rust Belt. It was really, really booming back from the 30s all the way up until the 80s, when basically a lot of factors came in, and these smaller cities and so on that produced iron and had foundries and everything were all crashing. So Steubenville, I think it peaked at like 120,000 people. It was down to something like 20,000 when I was working there. So you had this weird ghost town. They had like 20-story Art Deco buildings downtown, yet you had this almost bomb blast zone outside in the inner area where all the houses had just been dilapidated and bulldozed down. And then there was a bit of a college a little farther outside there, a university that was doing okay. But it was a rough town. The thing is, the people who had ambition, the people who had skills, the people who were marketable, they left. They left 30, 40 years ago. But the people left behind, a lot of them were lazy, unskilled, troubled, and they dominated the area. And there's one thing that even the most unskilled and lazy people can do is breed. So yeah, those households are full of more and more people, and you're getting generations of more socially and economically dysfunctional people layered on more. And unfortunately, that beautiful little city is really, really a rough spot to go. We're watching the entire state of California start to do that now. And it's going to be interesting to watch where that goes in the next decade, because it's a lot easier to drive out resources than to bring them back in. And it's really actually quite sad to watch, because it is a beautiful state in a lot of ways, but they've really just devastated it with, like Venezuela, socialism and stupidity. All right, well, let's get on to somebody who's not so much into socialism, and I haven't found it to be too stupid. Sean Polzer's in here, if we can catch you between sneezes, and give us an update on the business world.
Yeah, excuse me there. Kind of a little bit of the allergy thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I put on some ragweed today before I came into the studio.
Yeah, that must be the reason. Yeah.
So either way, this Sean writes for the Western Standard on our business and energy files, and among other things. What's topping the stories, Sean?
Well, we've got John Deere.
Yes.
So if you recall, a couple weeks ago, there was U.S., I guess, farm retailers, the Farm Walmart Tractor Supply. I don't know that they actually sold tractors, but
for Canadians, it's like a version of Canadian Tire. It's not just tires so much. It's kind of a generalized hardware and neat. Yeah, they're really nice stores, Tractor Supply,
in the smaller towns in the U.S. And then so they kind of capitulated to a online campaign, activist campaign, to revoke some of their DEI and green energy and woke, inclusion policies. And they said they were going to focus more on veterans and farm groups like 4-H and kind of a little more of their core constituency. So these same folks, they went after John Deere, which actually does make tractors. So John Deere is one of the oldest publicly traded companies in the United States. It goes back to about 1837. It predates
older Canada.
Yeah. So anyway, today they issued out a statement that they are going to abandon some of these policies as well to kind of focus on their core constituents. So This idea that somehow the customer is always right, and
it's not just these groups lobbying, though. Do you think, to a degree, maybe some shareholders are finally speaking up too? I mean, they're saying, "Hey, I bought stock in your company to make money. I bought stock for you to give me a return on my investment, not to go out funding and taking part in these DEI hires and programs and things like that." There's got to be internal pressure we probably don't see as well.
Well, absolutely, and I think the poster child for the whole thing is Bud Light. Dylan Mulvaney.
And knowing your market, right? If you're running a little trendy coffee shop, by all means, dive into that. This is Bud Light. This is the rodeo beer. They don't.
The rodeo beer, exactly. UFC. So they're trying to go back to UFC and resign some of the NFL and those kind of macho kind of sponsorships and kind of undo some of the damage that they've done. So I think there's a like once bitten, twice shy kind of mentality amongst
one of the biggest marketing flubs since the new Coke, I would say.
The new Coke.
I'm dating myself there.
I'm old enough to remember. We've got a tale of two pipelines. So we've got Keystone XL and we've got Trans Mountain. So Trans Mountain, as everybody knows, was the government-funded boondoggle that was about $35 billion. $30 billion over budget. But now that it's up and running, it's shipping oil to North Korea, Japan, China, and this thing is taking off like gangbusters. And the prices that we're getting for oil are like less than $5 under Brent prices, so that's like $80. It's like this thing is turning into a gold mine for the Alberta government.
Well, it's good. And for people who don't understand, like, because of our limited access to outside markets, we used to sell our product at a heavy discount compared to West Texas.
Right, going overland down to Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, so now that's the biggest difference we have, is now that we can access competitive markets, we don't have to apply such a discount to get them to purchase.
Absolutely, and that's the other half of this story. So Keystone XL was supposed to be that overland pipeline that was going to go down to the Gulf of Mexico and ship something like 1 million barrels a day, down to these refineries in Houston. And Canada-U.S. Trade Tribunal basically put the kibosh on a $15 billion damages claim, after Joe Biden canceled it on his first day of office. So if you recall, Barack Obama rejected it, and then Donald Trump came in and encouraged them to reapply. They couldn't get it done in the 4 years before. You can argue whether or not he lost the election.
I'm not going into that, but either way, they got most of it done, though, right? Like there's just a little piece just crossing that border that had to finish it off, and
like about 150 yards.
We just kind of maybe just launch it over, just spray it over there. They'll have to clean it up.
By rail.
Go by rail. That worked out well in Quebec.
Ship it over by rail and then come back, and there's a big loop of rail cars. But anyway, so TransCanada, which actually was forced to change its name to TC Energy, because
don't want to say the P word.
Don't say Canada. Down in the States.
Well, Canada or pipeline. Yeah. So there was this idea that somehow their name was politically prejudicial, so they changed it to TC Energy to try to get it approved. But no, Trade Tribunal has tossed it. The sad part is that the Alberta government has got about something like $2 billion sunk into it. This was Jason Kenney took an equity stake in the pipeline back in 2020 to try to get it jump started. We've got a separate kind of claim in front of the tribunal, but if they're going to turn down $15 billion from TransCanada, quote unquote, TC Energy, then chances of Alberta getting its money back are probably slim to none. Got a column that mentions that coming out in the next couple of days, because Premier Smith is considering getting into business with the Heritage Fund, but that's a separate issue.
Well, Premier Smith has said on multiple occasions that she kind of wants to see Keystone XL come back on the books, but I don't think so. I think this is the final nail in the coffin. I think it's done. It's dead. Deader than a doornail. Who would want to bring it back after all this?
I mean, all you could hope for is that if Trump got elected this fall, that he would give the thumbs up yet again. You connect that final piece, but you're going to get investors to entrust billions to get that running again.
And if I'm the company, and do I want to go through this?
How many times are you going to deal with that?
It's almost like Groundhog Day, right? Let's see. So CNRL was fined about $250,000 for dead birds on its tailings ponds. right? So we don't know how many actual dead birds there were, but chances are, it's, 100 or a couple hundred. And the irony is that conservative estimates on the windmills, which nobody can track, are suggesting like maybe 40,000 a year.
Well, and I mean, it's usually ducks on the tailing ponds as well, which I don't want to see slaughtered, but I mean, go to any Chinatown and see how many are hanging in the average window. And I mean, a good restaurant's going to go through 100 ducks a day anyways.
Well, I don't want them covered in oil.
No, a deep fryer, that's about it.
Yeah, deep fry. Exactly.
But again, the fines don't reflect the amount of damage. That's all. I mean, you want to mitigate, but come on, guys, it's 100 ducks.
And then, in fact, the Canadian, I think it's the Canadian government that does the endangered species. Anyway,
Yeah.
So there's 3 species of woodland bats in Alberta that were put on the endangered list, specifically because of the windmills, because they're killing like
Bats,
unknown
have a
numbers.
really hard time.
So like
yeah.
the numbers of these things have been going down, and like I said, nobody knows exactly, but it's about 10 per windmill. And there's, about 2,000 or 3,000 windmills in Alberta now. So you do the math. That's like,
Yeah. Well, it's back to what I was talking about earlier. I mean, we talk about renewable energy, but people forget to mention there is an impact. I mean, there is
absolutely
an impact to
for
it.
sure, beyond the visible sightlines. And then finally, last week during the Stampede, I was covering the Canadian Blockchain Consortium trade mission to Alberta. So this was kind of a gathering of about 70 of the biggest and brightest minds in it's blockchain. So blockchain, we tend to think of it as cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, but it actually kind of goes beyond that, because we're talking about authentication protocols. And they've had some meetings with the government, Premier Smith, and at least 7 different ministries on how maybe this blockchain technology could be implemented into Alberta. And we're talking about things like land titles, getting rid of notaries, a lot of the expensive lawyers when you're signing these documents. Like you get into a car crash, you tap phones, AI generates a police report, insurance claims are all automatically set on the file. And insurance is a big issue that's coming up here in Alberta. How do we keep the cost down? So, because blockchain, even more than say cryptocurrency, is about authentication, right? So it's about secure systems.
Secure is everything.
And the Alberta government apparently this fall is going to be introducing some privacy legislation to try and get on top of it before it kind of takes over, because this technology is coming. So what the cabinet ministers are saying is they won't be able to seize your bank accounts. They won't be able to seize your assets. We saw during the trucker convoy, all these different kinds of things. And
things are changing so fast. You just got to try and stay on top of it.
It's a brave new world. They're not going to be able to steal money right out of your pocket.
No.
This is a problem with cash. I know that a lot of what the Western Standard readers like to use cash, and feel a little more secure. But actually, cash is not a very secure method of exchange.
It can get stolen too. I mean, keep it in your pillow, but somebody breaks in your house, they get your
identity theft. They were talking about cases where people were selling people's homes, completely out from under them without them even knowing it, right? So this blockchain technology is going to prevent all that.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's really, really interesting.
All right. Well, thank you for the extended update. Lots going on in the business world as well. And I'll get you some clarity before you come in next week, and we'll All right. Thanks, Sean, and we'll see you outside in the newsroom shortly.
Excellent.
All right, that is our business and energy man, Sean Polzer, with the update. So that's all the time we got today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We covered a lot of ground. There's just so much to cover right now. Holy cow, so much news. It's nuts. Keeps us rolling, though. So thank you all for tuning in this week. Hey, share these links with other people. Get it out there. Spread the word. Beat the government-funded media. They're all going broke anyways. Check out Corustalk if you want to see a horror story. Either way, thanks for tuning in today, guys. We'll see you all again next week at this time.